The first mistake the Xylos Empire made was assuming silence meant safety. I was there when they learned otherwise, standing in the observation pit as their envoys watched the human juveniles on the holographic plane. The children were small, soft, brightly colored in mismatched fabrics, laughing in a way the translators flagged as harmless joy. The Xylos delegates relaxed their frilled crests. I felt the cold knot in my stomach tighten. They had come to catalog threats. Humanity had survived first contact too easily, the Empire said. No planet endures orbital sieges and still sings unless something is wrong with it. So the envoys demanded cultural demonstrations from Earth, beginning with the least dangerous strata, childhood recreation. I remember the human liaison smiling, a tired smile that never reached her eyes, and granting the request. The game began without weapons. No blades, no plasma, no screaming war chants. A circle formed. One child closed their eyes and counted aloud, numbers tumbling like pebbles. The others scattered, footsteps drumming against stone. The Xylos murmured approval. Stealth exercises, they assumed. Evasion. Nothing extraordinary. Then the counting stopped. The child opened their eyes and began to hunt. I watched the Empire's analysts lean forward as the predator moved, slow and deliberate, listening. The hunted children pressed themselves into shadows, breath held, hands clamped over mouths. When one was found, there was an explosion of motion, shrill cries, laughter spiking into panic, bodies colliding. The captured child was dragged into the open and made to stand beside the hunter, transforming instantly into another seeker. Cooperation through enforced loss, the analysts recorded. Adaptation through failure. I tasted iron. Next came the sticks. They were crude lengths of wood, uneven and splintered. Two teams faced each other across a marked boundary. The objective, the liaison explained, was to knock opponents out. The word translated poorly. The Xylos asked for clarification. The liaison hesitated, then said, "You hit them. If they drop the stick, they're out." The first strike cracked across a knuckle. A child yelped, shook their hand, and smiled. Pain acknowledged, not avoided. The Xylos crest stiffened. Blows followed, faster now, purposeful. Children learned angles, timing, feints. They learned how much force disabled without breaking bones. They learned restraint as a skill. When a smaller child fell, the game paused. Hands helped them up. The match resumed. "Why do they continue?" an envoy asked me privately, their voice a dry hiss. "They are injured." "Because," I said, "the rules allow it." Then came the game with no teams. The ground was lava, the children declared. Invisible, lethal. They leapt from stone to stone, inventing safe paths where none existed. When one slipped, the others screamed and laughed, memorializing the fallen with dramatic wails before resuming. The dead returned moments later, reborn without consequence. Death rehearsed, defanged, mocked. The analyst's notes slowed. By the time the final game began, the Xylos had stopped speaking. The children lined up. One was chosen at random. They were told a word and sent away. The rest received a different word. When the chosen child returned, the group answered questions with lies, subtle and shifting, until the outsider guessed wrong and was punished with playful shoves and chants. Social exclusion weaponized. Deception normalized. Unity enforced through shared falsehood. The liaison ended the demonstration. The children ran off, bored now, hungry for snacks. In the silence that followed, the Empire finally understood. These were not games. They were simulations, layered and merciless, teaching pursuit, pain tolerance, rule exploitation, imagined catastrophes, and the mathematics of belonging. Taught before mercy could soften the lessons. The Xylos envoy turned to me, eyes dark. "What do their adults play?" I did not answer. They requested the data files, eager to quantify fear, to rank it, to file it away. I watched their hands tremble as they signed the release. Outside the chamber, alarms rang as Xylos war doctrine recalculated probabilities, shrinking futures, rewriting victory conditions. Childhood, they realized, was humanity's longest training cycle, and it never truly ended. Not on battlefields, not in classrooms, but everywhere rules existed, and someone chose to test them. Because the Empire had only just begun to be afraid. The Empire did not leave Earth after that. Fear, I learned, does not always flee. Sometimes it circles, probing for weakness. I was assigned as cultural interpreter, a role that felt like treason with better lighting. The Xylos demanded deeper access, not to armies or factories, but to schools. They said they wanted context. They always said context. We walked halls painted with animals and alphabets. The children stared at the envoy's translucent armor with the same curiosity they'd shown the games.
No awe.
No terror. A teacher clapped for attention, and the room obeyed. Discipline without coercion unsettled the Xylos more than violence ever could. Lessons began with stories. Heroes failed. Villains repented. Consequences arrived late, sometimes not at all. The analysts flagged narrative inconsistency as a flaw. I knew better. Humans were being taught that rules bend, that endings are negotiated, that justice is a conversation. Flexibility, not obedience. Then came drills. A bell rang, without warning. Lights dimmed. Children moved, practiced and precise, to corners and corridors. They locked doors, stacked furniture, silenced devices. The Xylos scanned for threats that never arrived. I explained active response training. The Empire translated it as perpetual siege. Their crests darkened. At recess, the children ran again. Chasing returned, but now with variations. One game required sacrifice. A child would deliberately draw pursuit so others could escape. They volunteered eagerly, faces bright. The Empire's probability engines hiccuped. Altruism deployed tactically was not in their models. In the cafeteria, negotiations unfolded over trays. Trades were struck, alliances formed, betrayals forgiven before dessert. A smaller child demanded protection, a larger one demanded payment. Terms were met. Power redistributed daily, informally, without bloodshed. I watched an envoy record it as proto-politics. Later, we observed a classroom dispute. Two children claimed the same chair. Voices rose. The teacher did not intervene. The room watched. Finally, one child suggested time-sharing. The other refused, then relented when isolation loomed. Consensus through social gravity. The Empire whispered about soft coercion. I thought of gravity wells and how gentle forces shape galaxies. The Xylos requested interviews. They asked the children what scared them. Monsters, some said. Darkness. Losing friends. Failing tests. When asked what they did when afraid, the answers varied. Run, hide, laugh, tell stories, make rules, break rules. One child shrugged and said, "We play until it's not scary." The translators stuttered. That evening, the Empire convened a closed council. I was summoned to clarify contradictions. They prepare for disaster, an envoy said, yet treat it as fiction. They rehearse cruelty, yet enforce kindness. Explain. I searched for words that would not doom us. They learn control, I said. Not over others. Over themselves. The council replayed footage of a child falling, crying, being comforted, then standing back up. Pain acknowledged, then integrated. Failure normalized. Recovery expected. The Xylos doctrine valued avoidance. Humans valued return. A senior envoy asked the question they'd been circling. When does this training end? I shook my head. It doesn't. It changes names. Silence spread. Calculations bloomed and died. If childhood was rehearsal, adulthood was performance, and war was only one stage. The Empire began to understand that humanity's greatest weapon was not rage or ingenuity, but familiarity with fear. Taught early. Shared often. Played with until it lost its teeth. As we left the council chamber, alarms sounded again. Not from Earth but from Xylos space. Long-range sensors had detected human entertainment broadcasts spreading through trade networks. Simulations mislabeled as games. Audiences reacting with unease, then fascination. On the transport back to our quarters, an envoy asked me, quietly, whether humans remembered being children. I told them we carry it like a second spine, flexible and unbreakable. That memory informs how we joke under fire, how we test limits, how we forgive ourselves for mistakes and others for wounds. Childhood teaches us that survival is iterative, that you fall and get up, that the group matters, that the game continues. They recorded my answer, tagging it as psychological inheritance, and finally looked afraid of inheritance. They asked no more questions, and the transport hummed like a held breath. They were about to receive culture. Culture arrived disguised as kindness. The Xylos called it an exchange, a harmless reciprocation meant to balance the unease spreading through their outer systems. They invited human representatives to observe Xylos juveniles at play. I accompanied the delegation, my role unchanged, my dread sharpened. The Xylos young did not run. They floated in ordered clusters, manipulating light fields into precise geometric puzzles. Each child was assigned a role, a pattern, a correct solution. Errors caused the construct to reset. No laughter followed mistakes. Only quiet recalibration. The envoys watched proudly, convinced this would reassure us. The humans smiled politely. I saw recognition flicker behind their eyes. Not admiration. Diagnosis. One human child, allowed as observer, tilted her head. What happens if you mess it up on purpose? She asked. The translators hesitated. The question had no clean equivalent. The Xylos instructor replied that purpose was alignment, not deviation. The human child nodded slowly, as if filing away a secret. On the second day, the Xylos permitted limited interaction. A shared activity. The humans suggested a simple game, one I recognized instantly. Rules were explained quickly. The objective was to pass an object without being caught by a designated seeker. The Xylos agreed, eager to demonstrate adaptability. They failed immediately. When the seeker approached, the Xylos froze, awaiting instruction. The humans moved instinctively, breaking formation, inventing paths mid-motion. The object changed hands in chaos, laughter erupting like static. The seeker hesitated, overwhelmed by variables. When the game ended, the Xylos children appeared shaken, crests dim. They requested the rules again. There aren't any more, the human instructor said gently. That's all of them. The Empire's observers convened emergency review. Their juveniles showed stress markers, anxiety spikes, decision paralysis. The humans, meanwhile, reported enjoyment, stimulation, engagement, growth. The disparity was logged as incompatible developmental doctrine. On the third day, a Xylos child asked a human why they laughed when chased. The human answered without thinking, because it means someone wants to catch you. The sentence rippled through the chamber. Being pursued as validation. Danger reframed as attention. The analysts flagged it as catastrophic inversion. That night, Xylos networks lit with internal dissent. Parents questioned protocols. Educators demanded revisions. The idea spread quietly. Perhaps preparation without chaos was incomplete. Perhaps safety without stress bred fragility. The Empire called it contamination. They tried to contain it. Human media feeds were restricted. Cultural exports quarantined. Too late. Curiosity had already taken root. Xylos adolescents began inventing unsanctioned activities, hiding from supervisors, racing through maintenance tunnels, lying to test detection thresholds. When caught, they did not beg forgiveness. They laughed, surprised by their own reaction. The Empire responded with force. Playgrounds were shut down. Schedules tightened. Deviations punished. The doctrine reasserted itself, brittle and absolute. I was summoned before the High Strategos. His voice echoed like grinding stone. Your species destabilizes through innocence, he said. You teach disorder before duty. I met his gaze. We teach choice before command. He dismissed me with a gesture heavy as a verdict. As transports prepared to remove the human delegation, something unprecedented occurred. A group of Xylos juveniles blocked the exit corridor. No weapons. No demands. They simply stood there, refusing to move, mimicking a human tactic I'd seen 100 times in protests and playgrounds alike. Passive resistance learned through observation alone. The guards hesitated. Protocol offered no response to refusal without aggression. In that pause, the children scattered, darting through side passages, laughing. The sound echoed, alien and bright. Alarms blared. Order fractured. For the first time in recorded history, a Xylos facility descended into unscripted chaos caused not by invasion, but imitation. From the shuttle viewport, I watched lights flicker across the Capitol spire. The humans beside me were silent now, expressions unreadable. They had not meant to teach rebellion. They had simply been themselves. As we broke orbit, my console filled with incoming reports. Xylos simulations failing. Compliance curves collapsing. The Empire discovering too late that play, once introduced, could not be unlearned. They had studied humanity's childhood games as curiosities. They were now facing the consequences of letting a species that plays with fear teach their children how to smile while running. The Xylos Empire did not collapse at once. It stiffened. Like a wounded creature, it locked its joints and hardened its skin, convinced rigidity was strength. Borders sealed. Communications narrowed. The word play was classified as a destabilizing concept. I remained embedded, an observer no longer trusted and not yet expelled, watching fractures creep through marble certainty. They called it the juvenile compliance crisis. I called it withdrawal. Xylos children stopped floating in clean geometries. They hesitated. Patterns dissolved under restless attention. Error rates climbed. Educators added constraints, then punishments. The young complied outwardly, but something had shifted. I saw it in the way crests flared at unexpected moments, in the way eyes tracked exits even during lessons. Secret gatherings formed. Maintenance shafts. Unlit atriums. Places without cameras. There, the juveniles experimented with forbidden behaviors learned from fragments of human culture that slipped through firewalls. They chased. They hid. They invented risks so small they were almost invisible, then laughed too loudly when they survived them. The Empire panicked. New doctrine rolled out in waves, total predictive upbringing. Every action scheduled. Every interaction monitored. Spontaneity flagged as anomaly. The High Strategos addressed the populace, his voice calm and absolute, promising safety through perfect foresight. I watched adults nod, relieved. I watched children look away. It was during this tightening that the first human civilian ship went missing in Xylos space. Officially, it was a navigation error. Privately, the Empire accused humanity of cultural warfare. Play had breached defenses no fleet ever had. They needed leverage. A reminder that chaos had consequences. I was summoned again, this time not to interpret, but to witness. They brought me to a training arena, vast and sterile. At its center stood a projection of a human city, meticulously rendered. Streets, buildings, parks. Children's voices layered in, sampled and looped. The strategos explained the exercise, a simulated containment scenario. If unrest spread, they would neutralize population centers preemptively, to preserve order. You learned this from us, he said, almost accusingly. No, I replied. You learned it from fear. He did not correct me. As the simulation ran, something unexpected happened. The predictive models failed. Human behavior diverged too quickly. Instead of panicking, clusters formed. Instead of fleeing, some advanced toward danger. Signals spiked, then stabilized. The city did not break. It bent. Analysts scrambled. Variables multiplied. Someone whispered the word unplayable, meaning the system could not solve it. I felt a grim satisfaction, short-lived. Real space alerts flared. The missing ship was found. Its crew alive. Sheltered not by soldiers, but by Xylos juveniles. They had hidden the humans in unused habitat rings, lied to supervisors, rerouted drones, exploited blind spots. They treated it like a game. One with stakes they did not fully understand but rules they followed instinctively, Protect the vulnerable, keep moving, don't get caught. When confronted, the juveniles did not deny it. They stood together, silent, waiting. The strategos demanded punishment. Severe. Exemplary. The parents refused. That was the moment the empire truly fractured. Obedience, once automatic, became conditional. Adults remembered, dimly, a time before total certainty, before every path was chosen for them. The children had not remembered. They had discovered. Across Xylos space, similar incidents ignited. Not rebellions. Not yet. Refusals. Delays. Laughter in the wrong places. The smallest units of disorder, spreading like a virus with a smile. Humanity issued no threats. No demands. Only a request for their civilians' return. As negotiations stalled, I understood the truth settling like ash. The Xylos could defeat a human fleet. They could burn worlds into silence. But they could not unteach what had already taken root in their children. And children grow. The Empire prepared for war, convinced destruction could cauterize contamination. They did not see that they were not facing an enemy. They were facing a generation that had learned how to play a losing game until it changed the rules. I recorded everything, knowing history would ask when the moment passed, when inevitability tipped. It was here, in quiet corridors and stubborn smiles, where fear met curiosity and lost its authority. The countdown had already begun, even if no one yet dared to name it. At last. The war never officially began. Declarations were drafted, fleets aligned, weapons warmed, but the first decisive act came without banners or fire. It came from the children. Across Xylos space, schedules slipped by seconds, then minutes. Supply drones arrived late. Training cycles stalled. Nothing dramatic. Nothing punishable. The Empire strained to correct errors that were not errors, merely choices. Every correction spawned 2 more deviations. Predictive engines choked on possibility. Humanity watched and waited. We had learned patience early. I was ordered to evacuate. My clearance revoked. My presence deemed corrosive. As I boarded the last shuttle, I saw juveniles along the transit ring, hands pressed to the glass, eyes bright. They did not wave goodbye. They watched like players studying an opponent, memorizing tells. The strategos addressed the Empire one final time. He promised purification through decisive force. He promised the future would be restored. His speech was flawless. His audience was not. When the order came to seize human worlds, half the fleets hesitated. Not in defiance, but confusion. Orders conflicted with new protocols written by junior analysts raised during the crisis. Safety models now included uncertainty margins. Risk was no longer an absolute negative. Some commanders waited for clarification that never came. On Earth, no sirens sounded. Children went to school. Adults went to work. Contingency plans unfolded quietly, practiced flexible. Neighborhoods organized. Information flowed sideways instead of up. Humanity did not brace for extinction. We prepared for adaptation. The first shots, when they came, were surgical and restrained. The Xylos tested, probing for collapse. They found none. Every strike met response, not always symmetrical, not always predictable. Feints became traps. Threats became invitations to change tactics. The Empire realized too late that they were fighting a species that had rehearsed losing since infancy and learned how to keep going anyway. Then the children spoke. Xylos juveniles hijacked internal channels, flooding them with laughter, challenges, questions. They proposed alternatives. Games scaled to civilizations. What if borders were rules you could renegotiate? What if retreat counted as a win? What if survival was the objective, not dominance? Security tried to shut it down. The channels multiplied. In a desperate gambit, the strategos authorized the Unmaking Protocol, a system designed to reset cultural deviation by erasing juvenile memory patterns. Clean slate. Perfect obedience. The command required consensus from all planetary governors. It never arrived. Parents stalled. Councils debated. Children hid. Time stretched. In that gap, something irreversible happened. Xylos adults began to remember moments of unscripted joy buried beneath duty. A chase. A risk. A laugh at the wrong time. Memory resurfaced like a forbidden language. The fleet stood down without an order to do so. When the Strategos was found alone in the command chamber, staring at dormant displays, he asked me one last question through a private channel he should not have opened. "Was this your intention?" "No," I said truthfully. "This was our nature." Silence followed. Then transmission ended. The war ended without surrender, without victory. Treaties were unsigned. Borders blurred. The Xylos Empire did not fall. It loosened. A dangerous state. A living one. As I returned to Earth, reports continued to arrive. Xylos children teaching their elders new games. Games with rules that could change. Games where fear was acknowledged, then laughed at. Games that never really ended. Somewhere beyond mapped space, signals flickered. Unknown observers adjusted trajectories. They had watched the Xylos. They had watched humanity. They recorded one conclusion: a species that teaches its young to turn terror into play cannot be conquered, only provoked. New calculations spun. New fleets awakened. The galaxy, vast and silent, leaned closer, curious, as if listening for the sound of children laughing before the lights went out. The board was set, and the first move. I look at our own children now, running, chasing, daring each other to jump farther, hide longer, risk more. I finally understand the true terror the Empire glimpsed too late. We do not raise soldiers first. We raise players. Somewhere, a child counted softly, eyes closed, while the universe held its breath, waiting to see who would be found next in the dark. And the game is never finished.